Captain Jack here. It doesn't get much simpler than the Game Boy. The primitive portable, the master of monochrome. The Game Boy wasn't the strongest portable system in town, even at the time, but it hosted a wide library of games, and with that, our childhood memories. From remakes, portable franchise entries, to entirely new IPs, the Game Boy was the king of 90s on-the-go gaming. And in the modern era, that means plenty of Rom Hacks, which are changes to a game that can add new content, different graphics, or even fix issues that were in the original code. And we're looking at the top 50 of these ROM hacks for the Game Boy according to romhacking.com. This isn't my favorite 50, no, this is somewhat objective. All you gotta do on the site is sort by downloads. There are a few changes here. Duplicates and updates of hacks already on the list have been removed, and translation projects and Game Boy Color hacks have also been added in here just to add a little flavor. So with all that being said, here are the top 50 Game Boy ROM hacks of all time. Starting off, Super Mario Land X is a whole new level set for Super Mario Land, and it might not be much more difficult, but the selectable hard mode is where things can get really interesting. There are lots of colorization hacks on this list, but Alleyway DX might be the funniest. Alleyway was originally a launch title for the Game Boy, and it's just Breakout. That's all it is. But hey, it's in color now. Pokémon Battle Factory is a great idea. It turns Pokémon Red into the Battle Factory mode from the later Game Boy Advance and DS Pokémon games. You'll select different rental Pokémon and switch them out after a series of battles. Now complete with all the Gen 1 jank you know and love. There are tons of Pokémon hacks to come, but this first one is a strong entry. Super Pika Land is a bit of a funky one. It's a tileset hack for Super Mario Land that replaces everything with Pokémon. The levels are exactly the same though. The funniest thing here has to be getting the Super Ball flower. It just makes Pikachu red instead of turning him into Raichu, which I think would have been the play here. Wizardry Empire is the first translation on this list, and it's a portable spin-off of the Wizardry series that actually started in America but was way more popular in Japan, resulting in this Japanese exclusive game. It's one of the very few dungeon crawlers I've seen on the Game Boy. Castlevania Legends Speed Hack is really simple, but extremely necessary. It just increases the speed of your character. The game is basically unplayable without it, but with this hack, you have easily the best Game Boy Castlevania game, and it almost might be a good game. Kirby's Pinball Land DX takes Kirby's Pinball Land and brings it into the world of color. Some people can be picky about the color of Kirby with these hacks, but I kinda like the red accent going on here. This also marks the first colorization hack on this list of a game you would actually want to play. Wario Land 2 Enhanced Graphics changes the color of Wario's outfit to match Wario Land 3, and it also fixes graphical errors and undoes the censorship that was done by Nintendo of America. It might not be much, but it's easily the definitive version of the game. This one's really interesting. Pokémon Picross was a Japanese exclusive title that was never even released in Japan. A final build of the game surfaced just in the last couple of years, and with this translation patch, you can now play the game fully in English. Although, ironically, this is one of the few Pokémon games where you probably don't need to be able to read anything. But the game is absolutely great, and if you're looking for more Game Boy Pokémon goodness, check this one out. Pokémon TCG Mint's Adventure swaps out the protagonist with the female character you can select in the game's sequel. It's not a huge change, but it's for a game that doesn't usually get that many ROM hacks. Pokémon TCG on the Game Boy is a really underrated spin-off, so if this one gets you to play it, then power to ya. Super Mario Land New Graphics gives the original Game Boy Mario Adventure a graphical overhaul, but it doesn't color too much outside the lines. It redoes the graphics in almost the same art style, but it does look a little bit cleaner. Donkey Kong Land New Colors mode is a colorization hack of Donkey Kong Land, but this one feels almost necessary. The original monochrome released had too detailed graphics for its own good, and you could barely tell the sprites from the background. There's actually more here than just a new coat of multicolored paint, with speed adjustments and a menu that tells you how far you are in the game. It really goes above and beyond. Megami Tensei Gaiden Last Bible 2 is a spin-off RPG from the Megami Tensei series, and a sequel to the first Last Bible game. The translation for the first game does exist, it just didn't get enough downloads to make it on this list, which makes me assume the second game is better. It's pretty similar to the average Megami Tensei game, except it ditches the first-person perspective for a more traditional overhead one. It may be a sequel to the first Last Bible game, but this is really the last Bible. Trust me. Pokémon Pure Red is an enhancement of Pokémon Red that tries to maintain the delicate balance of bringing quality of life hacks to the game without adding in concepts from later Pokémon games. This translates into things like more bug, poison, and ghost moves are available without adding in the metal and dark types, etc. The sprites are still from Gen 1, and it still has the original game's identity, while making it slightly less aggravating. And I didn't realize how much I needed this until I tried it. Shantae Force GBA Enhanced Mode is the only Shantae hack on this list, and it's a pretty minor one, tricking the game into thinking it's running on a Game Boy Advance at all times, which opens up a different color palette and a brand new transformation. Survival Kids 2 is a sequel to a game that was originally released worldwide, but the second entry was only released in Japan, and it's now playable completely in English. It's like a Zelda game with some survival elements added in, like a hunger and thirst meter you'll have to keep track of, and it has multiple endings and openings. Link's New Awakening could almost be considered a master quest for the original Link's Awakening, with revised dungeons that even play in a different order. Everything's a little bit harder here, and the sword not being in its original spot is definitely a gut punch for the inexperienced, like me. But if you're good at Zelda games, give this one a look. Pokémon Yellow Gen 2 graphics patch is exactly what it says on the box, replacing all of the Pokémon and trainer sprites with those found in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. It even adds the in-battle experience bar that was found in those games. This is kind of the opposite of Pokémon Pure Red, with it being a basically unchanged version of Pokémon Yellow with admittedly nicer Gen 2 graphics. Mega Man World 2 GBC Edition is the first in a set of Mega Man colorization hacks in the top 50. And I didn't realize just how many people love these Mega Man Game Boy games. This one's a good package though, with a sound test added in, and new animations and redrawn final boss graphics. A lot of care was put into this one. Resident Evil Bug Fixed Edition is a unique one, being a hack of a game that was never released, kinda like Pokemon Picross. But the problem here is that the game was only 90% done. This hack makes the game actually playable from start to finish, so you can experience this bizarre 8-bit port of Resident Evil in all its glory. Dragon Ball Z Goku Kakikoden, which I'm not saying right, is a Dragon Ball RPG translated into English. Sorta. Only a few menus are translated, but this one has been downloaded enough to make it into the top 50. The battle system looks pretty interesting, although it's hard to tell what's going on. English speakers must really like this one, translated or not. Mega Man World Dr. Wily's Revenge GBC is a colorization hack for the first Mega Man Game Boy game. This one's pretty high quality too. It looks like it's always been a Game Boy Color game, and it may have slightly less quality of life features, but it's just nice to see these iconic Mega Man 1 robot masters given another go. Link's Awakening Redux is easily the ultimate way to play Link's Awakening, with tons and tons of improvements, including uncensored sprites and dialogue, and a sexy, now more readable font. And I know it's a small thing, but the stupid incessant beeping when you're at low health is finally removed. And just for that alone, it makes this the only way you should play this game. Pokemon Gold Silver 97 Reforged stands out from the crowd. It takes the leaked Space World 97 versions of the games and makes a completely finished product out of it, complete with an altered game world and beta Pokemon. It doesn't feel unfinished like the material it's based off of, and it manages to preserve their unique style. It feels like an alternate universe release of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Cave Noir is a pretty unique little title that's similar to a roguelike. You'll choose between different quests and make your way down into the semi-randomized dungeons. You'll learn the hard way that avoiding enemies is sometimes better than fighting them here. And I'm actually surprised this game never got an English release back in the day. It's not particularly text heavy and is a pretty original concept, especially in 1991. Pokemon Pink is somewhere between an improvement hack and one that changes the direction of the game. You'll play as the female protagonist from Pokemon Crystal and pick between Jigglypuff, Pikachu, or Vulpix at the beginning of the game. The Darksteel and Fairy types have been added here, and I didn't realize just how many Fairy types were retconned into the original 151. It's a fun little hack that doesn't rock the boat too much, and is actually the only hack of Pokemon Blue on this list, instead of Red like all the others are. Pokemon Black is a creepypasta brought to life. It starts out pretty normal, but quickly a ghost will be added to your team, and there's no way to get rid of it. This ghost will immediately kill any Pokemon it uses its only move, Curse, on. You can even use Curse against trainers after the fight, leaving only a tombstone as a reminder of their final battle. You might think this makes the game easy, and it does, but you'll pay for it at the end of the game. Metroid 2 EJRTQ colorization is a very well done colorization, and is easily the best one of a pretty wide range of Metroid 2 color projects. These days, there are plenty of other ways to play Metroid 2, but if you need to play the Game Boy original, this is the only way to do it. Kirby's Dream Land DX is an easy slam dunk, and the original Kirby game has never looked better, although it does make me crave for a copy abilities hack for this game even more now. Pokemon TPP Edition replaces the playable character with green and beefs up the difficulty while allowing you to catch all 151 Pokemon. The TPP apparently stands for Twitch Plays Pokemon and was the hack used on the first anniversary of the concept, which was in 2015. 10 years ago. I feel old. Dr. Mario DX is yet another colorization hack, but it does add Dr. Luigi, Dr. Daisy, and Dr. Wario as playable characters, which is a fun twist, but I won't be letting Dr. Wario operate on me anytime soon. Wario Land Color Edition takes the first Wario Land game and colorizes it, which just feels right, as Wario Land 2 and 3 for the Game Boy always had the ability to be in color in some way, and it never felt right that that first entry was completely monochrome. There's been a lot of colorization hacks in the last few entries, and this ends that for a while. Pokemon Knife is maybe the only joke hack in the top 50. When you press select, you'll destroy anyone in front of you with your trusty knife. That's it. It's pretty easy to sequence break with this hack, as you can just stab anyone that opposes you. Doesn't appear fatal though, because they always come back when you reload the map. Shanking Misty has never been more fun. Grandia Parallel Trippers is a spin-off of the original console RPG Grandia, and this released in Japan on the Game Boy Color back in the day. The combat is definitely less open than the console game, but it's still pretty unique, and is yet another, now fully in English, Game Boy RPG to add to your library. Pokemon Thunder Yellow is a general improvement hack for Pokemon Yellow. All 151 are obtainable, and moves like Flash and Splash are given more utility. Even a few new areas are added. This is just Pokemon Yellow with heaps of quality of life improvements and the ability to truly collect them all. Pokemon Crystal Legacy is a huge deal, and it's kinda like what Pokemon Crystal did to Gold and Silver done to Crystal again, if that makes any sense. There's too many things to list here, but the addition of running shoes and an improved level curve are almost necessary changes for this game. But even the little things, like having unique party sprites for each Pokemon, something that was only seen later with Ruby and Sapphire, is such a great touch here. Of all the hacks I've seen, this one might just have the longest changelog. And if you're a fan of the Gen 2 games, check this one out. Mega Man World 5 DX is a colorization hack that's surprisingly high on this list. Mega Man 5 on the Game Boy is kind of a hidden gem and stands out from the other Mega Man games on the system with original bosses instead of recycled ones from the NES games. Adding on top of the colorization is a slowdown reduction and an NES-style pause screen. If you're only going to try one Mega Man Game Boy title, I would say try Mega Man 5, and make sure it's with this patch. Tetris Rosie Retrospection is one of the very few Tetris Game Boy hacks, which is surprising considering how big the game was for the system. This works to modernize the beloved classic with commonplace new additions, like the Shadow Piece mechanic and faster line clears. You can even stash a piece for later with Select. I like the name too. You can put on your rose-tinted glasses and imagine that the already great Game Boy Tetris was always this modernized version. Pokemon TRE Team Rocket Edition is a bit of an odd one. You'll play as James as you compete with Jesse on who will carry the crown as the leader of Team Rocket. Of course, the three starters are Ekans, Meowth, and Coughing, and you're James, so you have to pick Coughing. It's got its own entirely new world to explore, and the difficulty is maybe just a tad harder than the original. I love the custom intro animation. Not many Pokemon hacks will do that. Pokemon Crystal Kaizo makes Pokemon Crystal a marathon of endurance. Everything has been cranked out to the max difficulty-wise, and your enhanced movesets can help you through this gauntlet of harder trainers. Revives have been banned outright from use in battle, making this even harder. Also, all the major fights have shinies in them, just to rub it in, which is good to know because I thought the rival had rolled a shiny at first, which was the most depressing thought ever. Pokemon Blue Kaizo is basically the same treatment for Pokemon Blue. Everything's more difficult here, and the complex map redesigns means you'll take a beating from the brutal wild Pokemon as you slowly make it to the next town. Luckily, all the starters are catchable at the beginning of the game, and you'll need it. This time, instead of a shiny, your rival gets Mew for some reason. For the Frog, the Bell Tolls is a very popular adventure game that never left Japan. In a way, this game is the predecessor to Link's Awakening and shares a lot of its mechanics. You'll explore the land and transition to side-scroller sections as you enter interiors. You can transform into either a snake or a frog, and both are needed to complete these puzzle platform sections. It's got a story connecting it all together, and it's actually pretty short and sweet and an all-around unique experience. Pokemon Brown is probably the most famous Gen 1 ROM hack, and it has an absolute crazy amount of stuff shoved in. A completely new world, custom sprites from the GBA games, and tons of Gen 2 Pokemon are added in. There are even new types like Wind, Sound, and Gas, with a lot of Pokemon switched to accommodate these new types. This hack, in one way or another, has been around forever, and if you want a completely new Gen 1 experience, this is it. Pokemon Perfect Crystal version is kinda like Crystal Legacy, but is slightly more restrained in its changes. It doesn't make tweaks to the movesets and base stats of the Pokemon, instead primarily focusing on small quality of life changes, and the ability to truly catch them all. They're both good, but it depends on how much you want your crystal changed on which hack you should pick. If you simply want the game more modernized without any of the larger changes of Crystal Legacy, then Pokemon Perfect Crystal version is perfect for you. I'm kinda surprised this hack is this high up, but not really. Pokemon Red Full Color hack is exactly what you think it is, being a proper colorization of the original Pokemon games. There's no Super Game Boy trickery here. This is a Game Boy Color version of Pokemon Red, and it's fun to see the original Gen 1 Pokemon sprites in full color. For better or for worse. Rockman World 2 Music Improvement V2 is a very small hack. It simply changes the music in Rockman World 2 or Mega Man 2 for the better, which is great considering the music in the original game is absolutely terrible, with high-pitched, literally off-key notes. It doesn't even replace the actual sound data, instead modifying it into something you can listen to without dying. This hack is so essential it was automatically included in the colorization hack for this game that was further down this list. Pokemon Trading Card Game 2 is an amazing title and the highest ranked translation on this list for good reason. A sequel to the worldwide released original, this one builds on that game by adding an entirely extra world and adding the Team Rocket expansion with the devious high attack and low defense dark Pokemon cards. It is such a good second entry that has twice as many cards to collect here, and the legendary soundtrack sounds like no other. This translation does justice to this amazing game. Super Mario Land DX is probably the prettiest way to play Super Mario Land, with new sprites for Mario and the enemies and added detail everywhere. These levels pop like never before, and there's an added options menu for the hard mode and old graphics. It manages to modernize this admittedly rough around the edges Mario game while maintaining the controls and physics of the original, and you can decide if that's a good or bad thing. Kirby's Dream Land 2 DX is by far the most exciting Kirby's colorization hack. Unlike the original Kirby's Dream Land, which was basically remade in Kirby Superstar, Kirby's Dream Land 2 is only found here on the Game Boy. It looks absolutely gorgeous, and the extra visual effects and slowdown reduction have been added here thanks to the Game Boy Color's faster CPU. With this hack, now every single Kirby game is in color. It feels kind of weird to say, like we're talking about 1930s movies or something. Super Mario Land 2 DX doesn't need an introduction. Maybe one of the most sought after colorizations, Super Mario Land 2 has never looked this good. This brings, dare I say, the best Mario game on the Game Boy into full color, and it's so good that it feels like a lost game. I have no idea why this game wasn't given the color treatment back in the day, because there certainly would have been a demand. There's even Luigi added in here, which is just icing on the cake. If you try just one hack on this list, try this one. It manages to be unique and bizarre while still feeling like a Mario game, and a pretty good one too. now in color. Well, that's all for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.